Amazing. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm really happy to have Marco today with us. So, Marco, I think I'm going to kickstart the brief introduction of today's session and also STF, and then I'd invite you to introduce yourself. And thank you so much for being here, of course. So, hi everyone. Thank you for joining us today. ALMICS, which stands for AI Accelerator Lab, we present Major Innovative Constructive Showcase. This is a recurring interactive showcase that spotlights breakthrough work from founders and innovators in AI and adjacent creative fields. And each session is designed to foster exposure, meaningful connections, and knowledge sharing. So we drive both individual growth and collective advancements in APAC innovation ecosystems and beyond. So Studio Tim Fu, SDF, is a London-based architecture design practice working at the convergence of AI, computation, and spatial storytelling, founded by Tim Fu, formerly of Zaha Architects. The studio is known for emerging technologies with architectural expression. Their work spans from master planning and architectural design to arts and installation. So, Marco, thank you so much for being here today. Could you give our audience a brief introduction of yourself and what you're currently working on?
Of course. Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for being in here. As you mentioned, I'm part of STF team, and I'm currently leading the research area of the studio. And we have been developing a few technologies in the background to be able to change the way in which architecture, design, and in this case, art is being expressed using the help of artificial intelligence. So in this case, we are very excited to be announcing, this exhibition that is a result of the collaboration of many people in the industry to have this happen. We're currently working on several projects, of course, which go from a range of exhibitions, as you know, to larger scale projects as well. That's from architecture to urban design on a large scale, as well as a lot of research. Right now, currently, as the speed of artificial intelligence development is moving quite fast, so do we. We need to be up to speed in that sense as well. So thank you very much for having me representing the team. I guess this is the result of a collaboration of many of us, but I will happily represent and explain how this came to be.
Fantastic. Yes, it was such a joy to work with you guys on this particular work that we have right now exhibiting at the East Kowloon Cultural Center here in Hong Kong. And it was a very unique experience for myself as well. Before we go into the work, could you also share a bit more about what is it like working at SDF? Perhaps if I may ask that, because I understand that STF right now and yourself being such an important role, leading the R&D. Wow. I mean, what is it like working there? I'm guessing it's not quite different from conventional practices. What does your day-to-day look like? Would you mind sharing with us?
Well, it depends on the day, as you could imagine. Of course, there's a lot that we need to first inform ourselves on. Of course, there's a lot of management that needs to happen with the current projects because we are dealing with a lot of projects right now. Thankfully, the practice has been doing great. So we mostly have to deal with your normal everyday architecture office management. But then, of course, there's also this wave of information that we need to process every single week, almost every single day, because we need to be up to speed with all the news in terms of the available technology.
Right.
And then basically what we filter out is we test the new developments and see how we can integrate it into our pipeline. So in a way, it's a balance of parallels that we need to maintain, which is the technology that keeps evolving and how we can test
Mm,
it and apply it to the current project. So in a way, it's different
mm,
to normal practices because what happens is we need to find a way in which we apply all of this into existing
mm.
ongoing developments. So it's quite fast-paced, I would say. That's mostly the difference with maybe more traditional architectural firms.
Definitely. I think the every day is a learning curve, right? When there is a new AI, when there is some kind of new thing like update or whichever AI model. So what I can hear from what you just said is that there's a continuous learning and applying and then learning and applying and in the middle testing. So it's learning, testing, well, testing, learning through testing, and then applying
Mhm.
and then kind of immediately also making that into a project, applying to a project, and actually, that is the business as well, right? The firm. So it is very much like an organism. It's not corporate at all from what I hear, what you're saying. It's very much like a think tank. Every day different new things come up and everyone needs to learn. So in your organization right now, in your team, how do people balance all those things I just mentioned, like testing, learning, and then trying it out and applying? And when do you know that the testing needs to stop and you need to focus on the application? Perhaps that those were two questions there. One is how does your team work together to balance all this? And the second question is how do you, because you're leading it, you have to manage the team. How do you manage that balance?
Yes. So I think you're spot on. It works like a think tank. We need to check all of these available technologies and see how we implement. But there's always ongoing, we would call it the workflow that sits atop the best options at the current moment,
Okay.
at any given moment. So what happens is we test all of these tools whenever possible. Of course, there's a priority list in terms of the things we need to do to deliver on time all the projects. And then what
Mm,
happens is there is a constant workflow that keeps updating every time. So we know how
mm,
to deal with concept development, or when it's something that requires more precision, we also have a consistent workflow. And every time
mm,
that we require to use them, we can implement very quickly. However, when there is need to test new tools, whenever we
mm,
have time, of course, we allocate some time to this. And if we see that it has the potential to be integrated or replace any of the current workflows, then we do so. And we try to make it so every single time there's a tool that comes along the way, we incorporate it into this current, like, improved workflow in a
mm.
way. So we have a balance of going back to this latest version and then at the
Mm.
same time testing whenever we have this new technology. They usually come about, I would say, maybe like meaningful ones are coming roughly about every 2 months, maybe 2 to 4 months. So we have to update our core
Mm.
workflows. I would say they're changing every 4 months, maybe 6 months at the most. And by that I mean it's something that comes out and completely changes the
Yeah, I know what
framework.
you mean. Yeah, I
So
totally understand. Yeah.
yeah, that's roughly how it goes. We need to allocate the time, which is the most important thing, to ensure that we're able to adapt all of these things into the current day workflows.
I like what you said about core workflows. This means that in your team right now, you have a few workflows that they just work every time. They just work every time and you can always rely on them. And then I'm guessing that you would leave yourself some time and energy and resource to expand and to look for new workflows. And then you will keep testing, maybe you'll test four or five, and you pick up one or two that can eventually become your core workflow or even replace the previous core workflows because of how much technology is advancing, etc. So I really like how clear you were about that. Like around 4 months, you will have like a rinse of core
Mhm.
workflows. So that's the speed, huh? That's really the speed of how quickly pioneering firm like the one you're in right now need to move.
Yes, definitely. It's the skill that we need to develop the most, it seems, and this has been widely talked about already, and is the adaptability, is the capacity to take all of this new information and make something out of it and create something coherent out of these technologies, which
Yeah.
they have different outcomes, and you can morph them as you need. The ability to, for example, for us to now be able to code really complex pieces of scripts in Python and all of this, we had a background of being able to understand these languages and use them. But now the potential to use them to create new tools for ourselves has
Yeah.
exponentially allowed us to develop new tools. So that's what we're doing right now. It's a mix of improving workflows for architecture, but also
Mm,
tech. So now the benefit that I believe designers have is that we can now go into the world of technology a bit deeper and create
mm,
work tools for ourselves, which allow
mm.
us to just increasingly apply this over and over.
Yeah, yes, I can see that not only do you design using AI, you also design the AI workflows. And then you perhaps go even further to design the tools. I think the difference between design the AI workflows and design the tools is actually allow other people not within your team to use those tools, like with a UI, right? So I can see there's that that scale of involvement of development. And I guess it's not chronological either. There's no linear sequence. You kind of go back and forth in your testing and your development. I think this is a good segue to talk about the exhibition that we work together on, because I think that exhibitions are they're the best moments, they're the best opportunities for any team to push boundaries. Of course, there are limitations and stress still to make it happen, but it's a different kind of playground to a real architecture project. It's a different kind of playground. And so I think what's really interesting today is that we're going to show the behind the scenes to the audience regarding how we put this exhibit together called In Motion. And we're going to be very lucky to have Marco share his screen later to give us a bit more introduction on how his team works. So before we go into that, maybe I can give a brief explanation, introduction of what we're talking about. So I'm one of the curators of this biennale. It's called the UABB. So it's a Hong Kong Shenzhen biennale, and we focus on urbanism and architecture. This year, the topic that we focus on is called techformance, and I can explain a bit more. So it's basically AI, oriented around AI. So why we call it techformance is because it's a fusion of technology and performance. So you will see later when we show the final outcome of our work together with Marco's team, how it really comprises both elements. So in this situation, I'm both co-curator as well as exhibitor of this work. And architecture is redefined as platform, process, and public art. So it's not only a finished product. And so we are really asking the question, can we use AI? But also not only asking, can we use AI, but also asking what kind of art or architecture do we want to create and for whom? So this is a response to deep transformation in architecture now really marked by AI's integration into visualization, simulation, spatial generation, all of which you will see elements in the work that we've been putting our efforts in. And this addresses, it's an exhibition, it's an artwork, but it addresses critical industry gap. Like Marco said, adaptation, and this is also rapid adoption. But the gap is there's also low integration, right? So, the whole point of this exhibition is to provoke, is to ask, and I think you will see more about that later. So I think that should be enough in terms of the introduction of the overall umbrella of what we're trying to do in this exhibition. And there are other works as well, but today we're going to focus on STF's exhibit. So Marco, when you feel ready, please do feel free to share your screen.
Yeah, of course. I can share how is it that we managed to get to where we currently are. And there were a lot of technical limitations, and this is part of being in the part of the studio, which means 80% of what we are doing ends up being something that doesn't really lead anywhere other than learning about those mistakes. And this was the case as well with the exhibition. There were many, many obstacles that we had to find solutions for and alternatives. And this, of course, led us to where we are today. So I'll go first quickly through how we went to the initial concept of how we wanted to approach the exhibition, and then the process of how we trained the models and what we found was best or not ideal to develop the concept, and finally how we transitioned to in a way to materialize an idea that was better represented by that style as well. So I'm going to share my screen. Please let me know if you can see it, and then we can discuss about it. You should be able to see it now. Just let me know.
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Perfect. So at the beginning, what we were discussing internally, first of all, was how would we integrate artificial intelligence into this exhibition? And after a lot of rounds of discussion, internal discussion, we ended up having two main ideas, which was one of them was using a sculpture, a structure that was made more elegant and eloquent by the use of complex algorithms using artificial intelligence. But we also wanted to have an alternative which was a bit more dynamic. And what we came to realize is that it was interesting to be able to use people in the environment and allow them to be part of this environment. So in that sense, we discussed back and forth as well with you at some point, and then we realized that the better idea was from the two options that we had was to generate an imaginary connection between the digital world and the real world. And we are able to do that now in real time thanks to this wonderful technology that we are using now every day. So, of course, after we defined that that was going to be the approach, there were several ways to first test this because didn't have access to the site until later on. We had to
Yeah.
simulate and then calculate how everything was going to look and different types of situations and lighting environments and depths and etc. So this is one of the first technical things we had to solve, which was which camera are we going to use, how are we going to position it, what's the depth of field, what's the angle, etc. And we tested several of these things also with a few results of how the AI with the LoRa models will convert people into these elements that represent Hong Kong. So at the beginning, we had a mix of this sketch style and this high energy, like electric lighting that we had on some of the options. And we thought it was a good first approach. It was interesting to see how you can morph people that were just going into the exhibition and make them feel part of the exhibition, like they're there representing and interacting with what they're seeing. So it was very interesting to see how this shaped the landscape in a way. I hope you can see the conversion from everyone in here and all the objects that you had in here into something rational that try to represent Hong Kong. But we also found that maybe the style could be refined a little bit further and something that is a bit more dynamic and conceptual rather than literal interpretation of what we could find nowadays. So in that sense, we try to understand how this could be implemented and in on site as if you were looking at the exhibition by itself. And then eventually we ended up with the realization that essentially it seemed like the better alternative for this, which is after the few rounds of testing concepts as you see now, we first realized that it was better to do something that is 2D rather than 3D. So if I go back a few slides, you can see we first tried to add some depth, but what ended up happening is when people were extending their arms or generating something else in that sense, it was not really following the silhouette. It was not as impactful as we wanted. So we tried to simplify and make it into a 2D type of interaction. So the location of the person wouldn't really mind that much. It's just about how large they would seem in comparison to this 2D platform. So some of the preliminary ideas we had, you see in front of you right now. And then we refined this concept with something a bit less static. This feels a bit too static and Sean's way is all about landscape as a living continuous flow. So we pivot to something that reflects the culture a little bit better. Finally, this is how we get to what you see right now. Now, of course, along the way, there were many technical difficulties. We tested third-party apps to be able to follow the person along. And eventually, we just decided to train our own LoRa models with, I think it was around 100 variations of different images depicting some of these scenes. And then many rounds of trial and error, of course, of how these LoRa's are trained. We learned a lot along the way. We usually train LoRa's for architecture and training for artistic endeavors is a different approach. And then finally, the workflow that you now know, which is with specifically Touch Designer and many Python components that were just developed in-house as well. So that's roughly how this came to be and the arc that we needed to follow to be able to get to where we are at today.
Thank you so much, Marco. And for those who don't know what LoRa model is, could you give us a line or two explanation for that?
Yeah, of course. So the way we basically work is these models that we need to train, they're defined by fine-tuning models. So Alora is a lightweight version of this. So it's trained on a specific visual language without retaining everything from scratch. And in this case, it helps us to internalize the spatial behavior and atmosphere of the system without necessarily having to train everything from scratch. So it takes a library of information and then it matches it up with a natural language to be able to manipulate these images through text.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that explanation. Okay, thank you for the insight in the concept Do you think I should now share the on-site progress process?
Of course, and of course, if you also have any more questions about the process that maybe weren't disclosed from our end, because we had a few updates along the way, but of course,
Mm,
there's many things that at this point are just forgotten in the ocean of things that happened in the past
yeah,
few months. But of course, we can also go to the exhibition. I'm very curious as well because we had a bit of back and forth, but sometimes a lot of
yeah,
the day to day is lost, and I'm very curious about how some of these things got resolved because as well as you know all of this let's say creative research that we needed to do and development of the tools, there was
yeah,
also the need to calculate everything to work on site already with just using a model as
exactly.
a starting point. So calculating
Yeah.
everything using Grasshopper and then being able to replicate that one on site, we were hoping that it worked out smoothly. So I'm
Yeah.
very curious to see what happened on your end.
Sure. I'm happy to share as well. And for the audience, if you have any questions for Marco or the process in general, please feel free to ask in the chat and then we will come to your question at the end. So, I'm about to share my screen, but before I do that, I want to say that I remember that we didn't have the room until Christmas Eve. Like we didn't have access to it until Christmas Eve. And we we asked the contractors if they could be so kind to come on Christmas Eve to build the wall, and then that would then be the first time we tried to project it. There were I think there's some noise, perhaps. Please, please can the audience mute yourself if that's all right. But anyway, maybe it's a good point for me to share my screen. I can explain more while we talk about it. 1 second. All right. Are you able to see my screen?
Not yet. Okay, now we're able to.
Okay, perfect. Hope you're seeing my Canva, right? Okay. Yeah, so this is just the site, like what the site looks like. This is a very long corridor. Sorry, I don't have all the photos here, but it's a very long corridor. And this is a new building in Hong Kong called the Cultural Center. We're the very first tenants, I believe. There was an exhibition before Tim's, before yours, but it was more like a performance rather than, a set. So we were almost the first ones to test the inside. So by the way, this is Tim and Neil and Arturo when they came and we were chilling out. This was at the opening. And so let me walk you through. So first, this is a new room, like new as in brand new equipment, and we had to get the experts to come in to help us to test the lighting. Thankfully, we didn't have to deal with the sound, but also the truss. If you can remember, we were also discussing, oh, can we please have the dimensions of the truss, the heights, etc. This is because there are other pieces of work near us, but there were two big truss sets. So if we are sharing with someone else, we would affect them, like our truss height would affect them. So we need to allocate the truss, properly, appropriately. And then there was the projection, of course, and this is probably the middle. You can see the projection. We had to make sure that it projects perfectly because the projector can only go up once with the truss. After it's gone up, it cannot come down again because, first of all, it was New Christmas and then it was New Year. And also, if we want the truss to come down, need to clear the room and then we need to get a cherry picker, etc. As you can imagine, right? So that's the on-site. So we tried to project it, and it was also testing the projector for the very first time. And then here are the contractors building it on Christmas Eve, and they've just finished painting the wall. This is a wall that we built just for this exhibition here. And you can already see that it is not mapping to the wall yet, right? So this is
Yeah, I
the thing.
remember that.
So it's like
Yeah.
we need to match it. We need to map it because we haven't figured that out yet. We didn't have chance to coordinate before because we didn't have access to the room. Yes.
Yeah, I remember that. We already kind of have, and this is one of our main concerns when we were discussing about some of these things. I remember we started calculating with three projectors and maybe two, and how we were going to overlap them and how
Yeah.
we were going to deal with the compute power necessary to run some of these calculations in parallel and then, project. Thankfully, I think being able to use one projector simplified things in a way, but also at
Yeah.
some point we were discussing internally as well. Okay, we need to make sure that we know how to work basically the projection, which thankfully, of course, you can do very easily in Image Designer. But that's something that we needed to learn as well at some point because the curvature was, of course, going to cause trouble. I'm so glad that it was managed to be solved on that day. I imagine the pressure was quite high at the moment.
Yes, I was sweating. I was so afraid it wouldn't work. So here's more behind the scenes. So actually, as they were finishing up, there was no time, there was not enough time for them, for us to wait for them to finish painting before testing. So we had to test it while the paint was still wet. And then already I wanted to see, you can see that maybe I can try to play this video again. You can see there's a tiny camera prop there. That's the camera that actually captures the motion. So you can see that actually the work was already capturing the motions of the painters already. So that's how I knew, okay, it is working. It is working. We just somehow need to constrain it to the actual wall itself. So and then we try to turn the lights off and to see how after we turn off the lights, whether or not the camera can still project it. And I think when I took this video, I think Aziz was, which is your colleague, was I think we zoomed each other while doing a team viewer. So he was working on the script, fixing things and trying to map it. And he at the end he mapped it by me taking a video of actually not taking a video but facing my phone camera towards the wall, and then he was eyeballing the mapping in the script. So it was amazing how he managed to do that. So what you see here is kind of like because I also had to understand how to like what to click to play the script, right? To function it. And then I need to teach the helpers because I'm not going to be there every day. So every day there will be two helpers who go to the exhibition, and they will may or may not have architecture background because we have to outsource the helper, like the on-site helpers service to a third party, right? So then I had to make demos to teach them how to function the script. And then on the left, we had the two dancers come to test it even before we managed to map it. So, but they were great. And then this is just me. It was like 2 days before we need to open, and I was sweating under my armpits. I'm like, oh my God, is this gonna work? I'm so scared. And then, so this was more tinkering. And then at the end, kind of managing it, just like kind of me kind of also troubleshooting at the same time together with Aziz. So that's just a glimpse of how it looks like. And then at the end, thank God it was all, I saw this and I knew, okay, it's happening. And then at the end, we did manage to map the projection onto the 8 meter wall. So it was great. And let me just play this final video and the performance as well. This is, yes, I think it will play.
Yes, please, for whoever who hasn't been able to see.
Yes.
Right now, it's not sharing audio, though, in case you were.
Yes, unfortunately, I think that's the case.
Yes,
I would
it's
encourage you
perfectly.
to go to the Instagram and like this as well. Now I can just show the snippets.
Yeah, I think it's a great collaboration, and I really appreciate everyone, making or doing their best work to be able to make this happen. As well, the dancers just added so much to this.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful to see what they managed to do as well. And I can imagine, of course, I was also talking with this very often through the period, and the pressure was on. So I'm glad that it turned out the way that a lot of work went into this as well. And of course, I have to shout out to Abdelaziz. He also was working on this for a long, long time, and he put
Yeah.
also the care and love to make this happen.
Yes, I think it's really a teamwork. All of you guys together, really made it happen. Yeah, it's amazing. So please, for those if you're interested to watch the video, you can go to, of course, the STF Instagram where they have just recently posted that really nice dance video you just saw there. Okay, so amazing. I can see that there are some questions in the chat. Please feel free to do so for the next 10 minutes for audience in the Zoom right now. What I will do is to read them out in the next 5 minutes. I think right now, what I want to discuss with Marco is looking forward, right? Like looking forward, what are maybe after doing this exhibition, right? Even though 80% of the things may not have become the final output, but they've just become what you've learned. What is next? can I ask that? What is next? What are you looking forward to?
Well, there's a lot that we can do now, and I think this exhibition helped us realize the potential that can be within AI and the collaboration with people as well. And I think this
Mm.
was showcased beautifully by the dancers as well. And it's a way of thinking that we believe it's gonna be resonating more and more within the art community is that there's this plane of coexistence between both. And we hope to be able to explore more and use this technology to showcase that complex interaction even more so. There's a few things that we will show soon as well. We have a collaboration with the Gaudi Foundation as well. So we are using similar workflow that was developed in parallel with this one to be able to generate structures using catenaries and such. So it dwells into the world of architecture a bit more, goes back to rationalizing and structure. But this is only the beginning. I believe that we are gonna explore more in the world of art. And of course, there's a lot that we have to do also on the technical side in terms of development and urban design and architecture tools. So I think it's gonna be a really exciting year. Hopefully, if people are interested in seeing the development, then they can have a look and keep in touch. We'll keep you updated as well.
The collaboration with Gaudi Foundation is really, really cool. It's amazing. I'm so happy for you guys. So big congratulations on getting that and achieving
Thank
that
you.
as well. How about for yourself? Out of all the exciting things that's happening right now, 2026, right now it's only January. How about yourself? What are you most excited to try or to learn? Or what is kind of a project, a dream project that you haven't worked on yet and you wish you'd be able to do it this year?
Oh, that is a really tough question. Right now, we have had a mix of many projects, thankfully. So I would say there are a lot of obstacles that we look forward to, a lot of technical limitations and knowledge limitations that we really want to tackle on. So I would say maybe it's a personal
Mm.
dream to do an airport, of course, but we'll see how that goes. But probably we're gonna see something happening around those realms this year. It's been quite hectic and looking forward to seeing what we can develop next as well. I think we can't predict the future anymore the way we used to be
Mm,
able to. So that's very
yeah,
exciting to just see what the year is gonna give to us and how we adapt to it, because that's always the shock that we find every single time we expect something. Every year we expect something, and then something else comes along the way and just reshapes the way we think and we expect. So it's about
yeah.
changing the expectations as well. I
I
think
think
yeah, applies to art, applies to pretty much everyone right now. It's just a general feel of excitement of what's gonna
yeah.
come next and how we can do cool stuff with it. At the end of the day, this is what we're trying to do here as well. Is yes, of course, trying to make useful tools and improve whatever we can improve the built environment,
Mm.
but also a general sense of excitement and seeing where we can take all of these things and be as creative as we can with them.
Fantastic. No doubt, I think you guys are the pioneering team, so no doubt whatever you want to try or whatever you want to adapt, you'd be able to do so. And I just want to shout out to the attitude that you guys have. When I was working with you, I could really feel that you guys just won't settle. You just won't settle. If something's not working, you guys will find a way to make it happen. Could really feel that to-do spirit that you guys bring, and not trying to be too nice or anything like that, but I think I am quite practical to say you guys are quite excellent at what you do because of the attitude. Like you would test things, and if it doesn't work, you'd go back and try it again. I could really see that, and you guys were so patient with me, especially the 4 hour Zoom call or the 3 hour Zoom call that we had. Where you had to. Okay, so for the audience, I can share. Basically, I had to rent a supercomputer, right? So I have to rent a supercomputer, and then that supercomputer comes with nothing. It's a just a very strong with a strong card inside. So I had to download all the software, including, well, Touch Designer to start with. So poor Marco here had to teach me step by step how to do that, and they were just incredibly very, very patient with that as well. So very professional. I think every single team member and colleague that I've come across have been extremely professional and excellent.
Well, thank you so much, Adeline. It goes both ways. It's something that we are going to see more in the future with, which is everything is becoming a bit interdisciplinary. If there's something that you don't know now, you have this amazing tools that can help you walk your way through it. Of course, we had many instances where we didn't know the answer and we had to search and we had to do research and go back to the academic side of things. And then we had to apply and share your knowledge with you and you share your knowledge with us. So I think it just creates a good environment to be able to develop ideas further. And it doesn't matter if there's background in architecture or not. At the end of the day, now people can move around and try new things. And hopefully now we're able to do this more easily.
Right. Yes. Amazing. Cross-disciplinary is so fun as well. So, Marco, there are some questions in the chat. I'm going to go through them. And
Yeah,
like I
absolutely.
mentioned, please can the audience also feel free to put in that. And okay, so thank you, Winston, for this first question. Oh, I think there are some people in the waiting room. Apologies. Let me let them in, of course. Okay. And for those who are just joining, you might have missed the parts of the today's session, but don't worry, everything's recorded and you find it in YouTube. And you're just in time for the Q&A. Okay, so thank you, Winston, for your question. Winston's a graduate of MSA, working on a lot of computation and AI through his own work, and he loves F's work with the tool, especially one that is the Urban GPT. So he has two questions. One is that he's curious to learn about SDF's tools. Will there be a lot of potential to customize the LoRa and the neural networks in the workflow once you release your work? Really love working with something customized to make highly meaningful outcomes and extrapolate architectural design thinking. Marco, would you like to tackle that question before we go to the next?
Yeah, of course. And we're definitely interested in customization. We think that's where the meaningful work happens. When you're working with artificial intelligence, there's so many things you can do, but it's really when you customize it and shape it to the way you personally work it where it shines. But also we're being careful about how much of the pipeline we open up currently. Of course, there's a lot of these things that are also worked in parallel with clients. So some of the things we can share, and we'll try to do so in workshops and sharing in our socials. But some of the stuff is also something that we are going to need to keep at least for a while longer while we develop. The goal is not just to expose the knobs, but to make customization lead to actually coherent spatial outcomes. So we'll be sharing as much as we can in the next few weeks and months. But of course, just stay tuned and we'll try to do our best keeping everyone up to date.
Fantastic. That's very exciting. And then his next question is, another thing would be, would your tools be ran on cloud or something similar to ComfyUI where you can run it locally? One reason why he asks is, with the recent news of consumers buying parts to experiment, would it be harder over time due to PC part prices for higher end production? How do you seek to overcome this yourselves for consumers and for yourself as you need to test your product as well? So quite a technical question about hardware over there.
Yeah, so we're exploring both. Local gives you the flexibility and control in a way, but also cloud lowers the hardware barrier. The key for us is to making sure the experience is stable and real time. For example, when dealing with something like the exhibition. So we will choose a model that supports that rather than locking into one approach too early. But of course, all of these things are dynamic and they change. Sometimes for the tasks that you have at hand, you require one solution and depending on another one. For example, for the exhibition specifically, access to internet will allow us to increase the frame rate. But it has its own limitations. If you have a shutdown, then what happens is you have no exhibition. So it depends on the use case. Thankfully, there's flexibility, and that's always very useful in a world where we don't really know how the next steps will be taken.
Nice. All right. So a couple more minutes for, this is your chance if you want to ask Marco and, if you want insights. Oh, Winston has respond. Thank you for the answers. I'm glad you encourage self-customization. Oh, he has one last question. As a person who's just at the level of part two, currently me and a former classmate are working on space station projects where we are designing an urban fabric for each different sectors using computation. We are use also using customized AI workflows to advance our sketches and model work in rendering concepts. But now he's seeking new things to explore once it's finished. What do you suggest me or other part two here to explore in AI workflows? What do you see as highly important to future-proof ourselves?
In that case, it seems when we're dealing with artificial intelligence in architecture, the default seems to be generate models for images. And my suggestion would be to give a shot to other types of LLMs. Of course, you can use ChatGPT, Cloud Code, but mainly the coding aspect will be so that you can highly leverage because it allows you to take it into another level. Not only would you have the ability to generate your own tools, but also you can embed in those tools the intelligence of artificial intelligence, which means you're able to not only do the tools, the software that understands something more than images, but also you're able to find relationships between those elements that you couldn't do before. So try coding. That will be my suggestion. I think that's the next step and a very exciting one because it's not a usual path for designers necessarily. A lot of them do, but it opens up many doors. So that would be my suggestion.
And Marco, what do you use for vibe coding these days?
Oof,
Which,
it's a mix of everything. Right now we're testing Gemini as the best ones. Each one has a different use case, but we have to test it very consistently as well. We were testing Cursor as well. It was useful for more complex code, but it has a steeper learning curve as well. Some of these things going into GitHub repositories and working in these environments that have a bit of a learning curve. I would say test whichever you feel comfortable with to start. They're great right now. We have a workshop with P5 that I would suggest everyone to try as well. I can share later perhaps the link. I don't have it with me right now, but it allows you to code interesting experiments using P5 environment, which is great to start. It's Java, and then you can see if you want to pursue a little bit further down the line.
that's amazing. Yeah, so please do WhatsApp it to me. I will also share with the community later. I think perhaps Winston continues to ask if did you say colleague is the app? I think Marco said cursor. Cursor is the one. Oh, fantastic. Thanks for sending it here. Cursor is the app that he just mentioned, and he Winston is saying that he will also be looking at the PA Academy packages. Nice. Very enthusiastic. Cool. So, Marco, while we're waiting for any more questions to come along, and thank you also for sending the P5 JS. Looks very nice. I love the design of the UI of that already. You know,
Yeah,
the
this is
question that we always, lovely, the question that we ask the audience, sorry, not the audience, my guest always towards the end of each episode is what is one word that describes success for you?
I would say curiosity is the thing that usually leads to discovery that is beyond maybe your initial expectations. Curiosity always drives you to keep asking because to some extent there is never an end to it. And you can always expand on whatever your current knowledge allows you to see and understand. So I think curiosity would be the right one. It's the one that has, in at least personally, allowed me to continue looking for more, even though certain times in life and in a professional career you feel like you are in the right place. There's always the curiosity of what more you can find and much knowledge you can acquire and what are the other things that haven't been explored, you know? It's beautiful to
Mm,
think now that we are approaching a new frontier where we have just as an example, of course, the word has been repeated over and over, but AI is a
mm,
black box right now, which means you're able to just take it wherever you want. There is no limit. It's a new frontier, as exciting as it was exploring maybe the world before. And we are here to be able to do this very comfortably as well. You know, from the comfort of our own homes, we can now do research and see how people can use this wonderful new technology to improve the world, hopefully. That's the goal.
That's beautiful. I can really hear the passion in what you just said. A follow up to that, a lot of architects have been fearful when they discuss AI and when AI is mentioned. How does one turn that fear into curiosity?
I think testing the tools is the right approach. In many instances, what happens is there's this concept that exists in people's minds sometimes of what AI actually is. And sometimes when you test it, you start realizing what it actually means. There's a superficial idea of it, and then there's the depth, the different levels of depth in which you can get involved into it. And of course, we haven't reached the final one that requires a bit more knowledge, and we're going to have to machine learning and AI specialists in the future. But what I would say is it has a lot of potential to take your ideas, and once you have enough control, which is very important here. And we talk about customization, we talk about control a lot because that's what differentiates artificial intelligence as just a generalist that creates good looking images and a real powerful tool that will improve your workflows. And they can be completely your own. I think everyone will develop the workflows that align to how much they want to have the tool involved, how they design themselves. But I would suggest just to try them out. It's very important to not let someone else in the medium just tell you what it is and test it for yourself and see what it's all about. It's very exciting. I would say now it's more easily accessible than it was before. So that will help people get used to it. I think it's just a normal path of progression as it was with phones, cell phones at some point, and the internet and all these technologies. It will become normal in the next few years, but it's better to have a head start, I would say.
I think that's well said. It's just like computers. We don't even think about them anymore. But there was a period of time when people don't use them and we
Yeah,
survived. Amazing. Marco, I'm waiting for you to visit Hong Kong so that I can bring you around. Would
I'd
you
love that.
ever travel to Asia or have you traveled to Asia before?
Absolutely no, I have not. It's such a shame. It's such a it looks such a beautiful, beautiful continent. I'm really looking forward to it, especially Hong Kong. It's been on my list for quite a while. We thought we were going to be able to move the whole team. Unfortunately, just deadlines were upon us, and we had to balance out what we were working. But hopefully, very soon we'll be able to meet in person and see Hong Kong and maybe see where the exhibition was held as well.
Of course, I'm
Likewise, if you
looking
ever
forward.
are again in London, then of course you have to come and visit the studio, and we can show you as well some of the projects that we're currently working on around the area.
Yeah, I remember the last time when I was at your office when I swing by. I don't know if it was your previous office or maybe you're still in it. It's the one where you walk up the steps
Yeah, yeah.
like two. Okay, so maybe so that one. Yeah, and you guys were showing me a glimpse of what you were working on, and I also thought it was pretty awesome. It's pretty awesome how it was like a like I said like a think tank. Yes, when I come to London, I'll ping you and then we can get coffee or tea in the British way.
We can do it the British way. Perfect.
Thank you so much, Marco. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for everyone who's listening. And this will be recorded and then put on YouTube. So, yeah, thank you so much. Looking forward to the future. Very optimistic, actually. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Aline, for your time. Thank you for all the effort to put this together, and thank you, the audience, for being here listening to us.
Thanks, guys. Bye bye.
Bye.